some Board of Ed members are concerned about some parts of the policy. Are those concerns going to be addressed before the second hearing?
I tried my best to address those concerns this evening. I think the policy definitely does address the concerns about parental rights, and also the concerns that individuals may have about whether a student's gender identity is genuine. I think the policy definitely does address that. It's perhaps set up in language that might be a little bit difficult for some people to interpret, and I think that once this policy passes, assuming that it does, it's going to be our administration's job to make sure that we convey the policy and perhaps spell it out in a little bit of a different format. We have to have that careful balance of making sure that legally we are using the right language, and then also from a practical standpoint, perhaps translating the policy so that everyone can understand what the intent is.
What happens if the policy does not pass next week?
If the policy doesn't change next week, then the board would have to direct us on exactly how they would want the administration to move forward and how they'd want the policy committee to move forward. So it would mean that the policy committee, perhaps, if the board advocated for this, would have to go back and address particular language for us to modify and change. Or they could just say, we're not going to pass the policy, and that's the end of it. So if it was defeated, typically what happens is the Board of Education then goes ahead and says, well, we'd like you to change this about the policy or that about the policy. Or they can say, it failed, and then we're not going to address it again. The policy committee can always reintroduce policy, and if they approve policy, then it can go back to the Board of Education. But we can't bring back the same policy with the same language.
So likely, if it was defeated, then would the policymakers probably rework this policy?
I don't want to speak for them, but I think that, as you heard from around the table today, the vast majority of board members understand that we need this policy. The one dissenting vote was really about one particular aspect of the policy. And so really, I would imagine that if it was defeated, that we would have to rework perhaps what the concern would be from the majority of board members who voted down. But that wasn't evident today.
Okay. Do you think that this would go over better if there was some language in there addressing that if a student was not comfortable, if a gender conforming student was uncomfortable, then they could have some kind of.
So this is what I believe needs to happen, and that's going to be our prerogative then as the Board of Education, as the administration, to communicate to families. Now, once a policy is put in place, if we believe, and this would be the case with this particular policy, that we need to communicate and provide some literature for parents and students and teachers, we can go ahead and put out something that is different than the actual policy, that perhaps translates it in a different way that allows people to better understand what the intent of the policy is, and perhaps take care of some of the concerns of peers. Because the board needs to, and the administration needs to adhere to the policy. We can elaborate and have a frequently asked question sheet, or perhaps have another forum for parents to come and speak to us about their concerns. And that was really the powerful piece about last week, having a parent information session. People are able to ask questions. Here, it's very difficult to ask questions about the policy. I think this is a good example of this district really making sure that we are being considerate of the rights and the needs of all our students.